picture yourself stranded in the middle of the Antarctic Ocean. You make the grave error of peering into the abyss beneath your feet. You might anticipate seeing schools of minnows or drifting clouds of microscopic life, but the reality is far more unsettling. Below the waves, arachnids with leg spans wider than a large dog crawl across the seabed. Medusae with trailing tentacles outstretching the length of a blue whale drift silently through the gloom. Even the most ordinary fish have evolved into titanic versions of their temperate cousins. These are not mythological monsters, they are real biological marvels, forged by a freezing environment that has pushed evolution into overdrive. Welcome to the realm of polar gigantism. This biological occurrence remains largely obscure because it is exclusive to the planet's most frigid aquatic regions. Conventional wisdom suggests that in habitats where everything is frozen and food is scarce, animals should shrink to conserve energy. However, in these icy depths, the exact opposite occurs. Every species in this region seems to have transformed into a supersized variant of its former self, turning small organisms into giants and large ones into behemoths. To grasp the mechanics of polar gigantism, one must look at its most striking representative, the colossal squid. While many assume its immense scale is a result of deep-sea gigantism, that isn't the primary driver. These cephalopods reside almost entirely in the waters surrounding the Antarctic continent, surviving in temperatures that hover near or below 0 degrees Celsius. While the ocean's salinity prevents it from freezing solid at these temperatures, the environment remains brutally cold. As a result, these squids have undergone radical adaptations. Taxonomically, they belong to the glass squid family, a group typically known for being translucent and fragile. Yet the colossal squid looks nothing like its namesake. Through the lens of polar gigantism, it traded transparency for dense, muscular flesh to provide better thermal insulation. Furthermore, it didn't sacrifice stealth. Its body is a deep, reddish-brown, a hue designed to absorb the light from bioluminescent prey rather than reflecting it. At this size, the colossal squid has virtually no natural enemies except for the occasional sperm whale. Consequently, its anatomy is optimized for ambushing prey rather than fleeing from predators. The reason for this extreme growth isn't found in the food supply, but in the chemical composition of the water itself. Frigid water possesses a much higher capacity for dissolved oxygen than warmer seas. For nearly all living things, body size is limited by the amount of oxygen cells required to stay functional. In tropical or temperate zones, there simply isn't enough oxygen to sustain a supersized physiology. However, at 0 degrees, the supply of oxygen is virtually limitless. With this constraint removed, the biological limiter is broken. Over millions of years, this abundance allowed glass squids to evolve into leviathans. Because larger bodies are more efficient at maintaining internal energy, evolution compelled these creatures to expand or perish. While the giant squid of warmer oceans is also massive due to deep-sea effects, the colossal squid is a rare example of double crossover gigantism, merging both deep-sea and polar influences. This makes it the heaviest invertebrate on the planet, weighing upwards of 1,200 pounds, nearly twice the mass of its giant cousin. The squid is just the beginning. Consider the sea spider. In a tropical coral reef, these creatures are tiny, measuring only a centimeter or two. In the Antarctic, however, they reach a span of over 2 feet. This growth is driven by the same oxygen-rich environment. Uniquely, these spiders breathe through pores in their legs. Their freakishly long limbs act as massive intake valves for oxygen. Despite their size, these giant spiders are not aggressive brawlers but patient predators. They use their stilt-like legs to navigate over sponges and corals until they find a starfish. Then, using a long proboscis like a straw, they pierce the starfish and consume its internal fluids like a milkshake. But the starfish here have also adapted. Many Antarctic species have evolved 50 arms instead of 5, and can live for 4 decades, nearly 8 times longer than starfish in warm water. This evolutionary pressure has even produced the world's longest creature, the lion's mane jellyfish. When its tentacles are fully extended, It is notably longer than a blue whale. While the whale has more physical mass, the jellyfish represents the sheer atmospheric scale of polar gigantism. By comparison, its close relative, the blue jellyfish, stays small because it lives in warmer currents that don't force it to become massive. Beyond oxygen, the cold slows down the internal clock of life. Metabolism in these waters is incredibly sluggish, making large bodies more energy efficient because they burn less fuel relative to their total mass. Additionally, the Antarctic deep is one of the most stable environments on Earth. With constant pressure, unchanging temperatures, and few predators, animals can afford to be massive, slow-moving tanks. You might wonder if polar bears or emperor penguins fall under this category. Interestingly, polar gigantism only applies to cold-blooded organisms that let the environment dictate their temperature. Warm-blooded animals face a different challenge. They must burn calories constantly just to stay warm. The larger a mammal gets in a frozen region, the more food it requires to survive, and the Antarctic doesn't have the resources to support infinite growth in warm-blooded species. Instead, mammals follow Bergmann's rule, which states that larger bodies lose heat more slowly. Polar bears are bigger than grizzly bears because their mass acts as a natural insulator. But they can never reach the unlimited scale of the colossal squid because the metabolic cost would be too high. The most fascinating and tragic aspect of these giants is their reliance on stability. Because everything in the polar deep happens in slow motion, evolution itself is sluggish. Many of these species are living fossils, virtually unchanged for tens of millions of years. They are perfectly tuned for a world that is predictable and freezing. However, this makes them incredibly vulnerable to climate change. As the oceans warm, oxygen levels are plummeting. The very rule that built these giants is now becoming their downfall. In warmer water, their metabolism speeds up while their oxygen supply vanishes. These magnificent creatures are beginning to suffocate within their own massive bodies. Studies show that sea spider sizes are already shrinking in warming areas. If the trend continues, the rulers of the frozen deep may vanish entirely, unable to adapt to a world that is moving too fast for them.